Jake.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Ian.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Today, we're really excited. Got Ian here to help us review this one because he's the one who told Tom and I about it. We're really excited for this new album from it's a debut album from a brand new band called Purity Ring. And the album is called Shrines. Now, Purity Ring, this, like I said, debut, they're an electronic duo. So this is all electronica. Kind of has some, I wouldn't call it like the dance side of electronica. Ian, how would you describe this album?
It's actually difficult to pigeonhole. You see, right now in electronica, there's several different veins. There's people like Comtrues, who's going along like with the 80s pop. It's very stylistically driven, but not a lot of content. There's people like Tycho, who are taking electronica in really washy, really earthy and organic ways. And then there's also the EDM folks, the electronic dance music folks, who are doing just the strict, kind of dumbed down hard beats. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Tom and I love that.
That's their favorite. They listen to it all day. The beautiful thing about Purity Ring, though, is they seem to completely offshoot from all those camps. And especially in a genre that's evolving the way that it is, that really requires those camps within the genre to really develop. The fact that they're going their own way is really cool. So what they've developed outside of all these other camps is this really, I'd call it a luscious sound. It's got a lot of body. It's very emotional and moody, and they do a really good job of using the production to blend the inorganic elements and the organic elements into one another. And so they create this really grounded, sometimes doll-like, sometimes dance-like, sometimes synth-pop sound, and they get this really luscious result.
Right. The first thing I noticed that I loved about the sound is just how perfect the production is. Everything sounds extremely thick. For electronic music, I usually don't get a lot of thick sounds. You know, you get, usually the whole mix, you might have like one or two different electronic melodies that sound really strong, but this, I mean, you have multiple layers of electronic melodies and synths just kicking ass at every level. Everything sounds really full.
You have the really heavily sidechained synths, but it's not like as heavy as like a ridiculous dubstep or something, you know? It doesn't sound weird and off-putting. It sounds really natural. It flows. And also the beats, instead of being really driving, they kind of sway. They kind of sway with the flow of the synth and how it washes around in the mix in a more three-dimensional aspect.
Now, the vocalist here, her name is Megan James, and she has a very sweet voice, I would say. And she's the primary vocalist. I think that there's a male vocalist on one of the tracks kind of in the middle.
Guest spot.
Yeah. But her voice, she doesn't, it's like I said, it's almost thin, you know, it's very sweet and thin. And at first that kind of bothered me. How about you guys?
It did at first too. I got used to it though. It grew on me, definitely.
Yeah.
I think as a big fan of Grimes, actually, I was actually used to it because she has that doll-like quality. So I didn't notice that vocal thinness at first because I was looking at the stylistic elements.
For sure. And what I noticed is that, like, originally I just wanted her to project more. I wanted to hear her just kind of, you know, put her voice out there and really control the
When
mix.
you hear music like this, you almost just naturally want Bjork.
Yeah.
You wish that she was just belting it like Bjork was, but obviously that, well, I'm sure that's probably an influence. That's obviously not what they're going for, and it's kind of an unfair expectation. So you kind of have to let them do their own thing. But yeah, I agree. That actually, it was a little off-putting to me at first, just that she never really went all out with her vocals, but she's still able to pull off some of those moods and some of that emotional appeal, which I find I really like when people are able to do that in electronic music, because I think without more organic elements, it's a little more difficult to pull off.
Absolutely. As far as other criticisms go, Tom, I know you were pointing some other stuff out. Want to just jump right down to it?
Yeah, I guess the big thing for me, and I know I like this album a little bit less than you guys, I was still impressed with it overall, and even more so just the fact that it did keep growing on me as I listened to this. I listened to this a lot. But the thing that I found was that despite the fact that I don't think there's a weak track on here, I think all these songs are good, some better than others. None really blow me away, but more than anything, just when I get to the end of the album, I don't feel like it's really made an impact on me. I don't feel like it was really powerful enough to leave me wanting to come back to it, to really make me think. I mean, that's really what I'm looking for in music, is an album that when I'm done with it, it's still with me.
Yeah.
And for this album, the second it's done, I enjoyed it definitely, but when it's over, it's over.
So
and that's the experience.
Would you say it's a little too safe? You know, we mentioned the vocals, how she could have projected more, but there's, you know, kind of sounds like it wasn't, you know, its lack of being memorable.
Yeah, for me at least.
For sure. Now, I really, like, as I started listening to this more and more, I really got into, like, the middle tracks. There's 4 tracks in the middle that I thought were just fantastic. In track 6, Cartographist, that track is really just kind of down and moody and kind of a slower tempo. And it sets up, you know, one of the bigger tracks, Velocities, track 7. It sets that track up really well, and that's kind of one of the highlights for me. And I felt like those tracks were just really strong right in the middle. And it kind of played off of that strength of that middle section from there. So the album kind of had like this big curvature to it. But it did, to me, flow as an album, and that's something that I really value. That's something that I really got into, because a lot of times with all electronic music, I typically rarely love all the tracks, or do I love the album because the album doesn't flow like an album. And I felt like Shrines actually does flow like an album. It was presented as in an album format, and that's something I'll give him credit for having the foresight even on a debut album. That's usually not something we see on debuts. Yeah. So, Ian, things you loved about it.
Well, devotees of Velocities in Music will be shocked to hear that I fell in love with this album. And for that reason, I'm giving it a high score. Yeah. Those of you who groan when you see me in an album review, get ready. There were a lot of things I loved about this album. I think for electronic musicians, it's hard to accomplish the variety of sound that they did without incorporating a bunch of non-native sounds. They seem to define in the very first track in Crawlers Out what they're going to do, what their palette is. They kind of lay it in front of you, the heavy side chain, the staccato kind of punctuations of high synth, the doll-like vocals, all that stuff. They continue to use that throughout, but they use it in so many ways that it creates, like Jake said, this really gorgeous arc of songs. I love that the production manages to unite all the sounds into one harmonious picture, which is why you get that luscious sound. Normally with electronic music, they let out a bass line, they let the synth carry the bottom part, and then they introduce something new, so you get little pieces. This was actually like a complete package. Yeah, for sure. And furthermore, it was a completely developed sound in my mind. I think it was safe, I think the vocals were safe, and I think the songwriting especially was extremely safe, and it's because they're experimenting with this new thing. I think they're going to get some good reception and they'll go somewhere good with it. But overall, I think the reason that I'm giving it such a high score, because emotion plays such an important thing to me, not just in the music I listen to, but in the music I write, is that I had an emotional connection to it. When I listened to the album, regardless of what my exterior circumstances were, whatever my life circumstances were, I felt different. Right. You know, and that's something that's extremely important to me. And it's something I also don't get a lot with electronic music. A lot of people can put in a wash or you know, a big synth, something like that.
Makes it sterile.
Exactly, and it sterilizes it, and you don't get that human connection, which I definitely got with this album.
Yeah. Cool. One thing that I really liked about it was that the more I listened to the vocals, I found that there was like lyrics here and there that would like pop out at me. Yep. It made me really odd lyrics that I started digging at and started examining more. And what it did is just the fact that, and while I didn't take the time to really dive into all the lyrics, look them all up, and go, what does this mean? I don't think it required that, because I think its function was to have the lyrics be interesting enough that it made me pay attention to the vocal parts. And after I started paying attention to the vocal parts, I noticed that I really liked some of the different vocal hooks and just how the vocal parts are written. I do think that she could have projected more and added a whole nother dimension to the vocals, but just the general melodies I liked. So that kind of helped me attach myself to the music a little bit more, and made this a little bit of a grower for me, because I probably started in the low 70s and came up, and I think, guys, I'm sitting on an 83.
Cool. I'm gonna go 77.
I'm gonna go 86.
Nice. What did you guys think? Have you heard Purity Ring? Have you listened to Shrines? Because this is a really cool album. Definitely if you're into electronica or just electronic music in general, this is an album you definitely should check out, and we would love to hear your feedback. Let us know at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. That is where we learn about albums like Shrines from you guys, because you guys play such an integral role in what we here at VIMTV do. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are and this is Ian.
And I'm Ian.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.